everybody, and welcome to Two Goals. I'm Katia,
And I'm Maria Laura.
and our Leadership Women Football series continues with a consultant currently based in Germany, but a global citizen above all. Marisa Schlenker is a former professional player with a background in sports, international development, cooperation, and partnerships around sport for development. With an extensive curriculum advising in gender, corporate social responsibility, fundraising, and governance, amongst others, always with the objective of helping social business models contribute to sustainability goals in sports. Marisa, welcome to Two Goals.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. Looking forward to this conversation.
So let's start. And probably the ones who know you and who know your work today, they are not aware of your path inside of the pitch. You were a professional football player playing the USA, Spain, and Sweden, and you also coached the girls' team in Brazil and led them to the Homeless World Cup 2010 in Rio de Janeiro. Only by this, we already have here a lot to cover. So, can you tell us how were those days playing professional and semi-professionally, the transition from playing college in the USA to playing in European leagues, and also how fantastic as well as challenging was it to deal with a group of talented young girls and their backgrounds?
Yes, definitely. I'll start, with my own background in football. So growing up, and I'll say football, I don't like to use soccer, but for the American audience, if you have American audience, then yes, of course, soccer. So I grew up in the Midwest in the US, and I played lots of different sports. And kind of at a certain age, I had to decide, if I really wanted to go for one. And I wanted to, because in the US, you have the model where you really try to play at the university level. And so I decided to pursue football. So I joined a club team. I did everything that I kind of knew I had to do and I wanted to do in order to try to secure, continue playing and playing at the university level. And so I ended up playing at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So it's a Big Ten university, and it's a competitive league. And I also was a scholarship athlete. So that was really important for me to be able to be an athlete, and then also obviously to be a student, and then also to earn a scholarship. So that was really, I loved university. I got to play. I was captain of the team in my last season. I was a center midfielder. Yeah, football was really a huge part of my life. Of course, you had to combine it with your academics. But it was also the team, the community. It was an amazing being able to play in the Big Ten conference as well. And then kind of when I was getting close to the end of my university, I noticed a lot of people were already thinking, okay, time to hang up our boots. What comes next? Of course, you're supposed to be thinking about your career. And I couldn't stop thinking about just wanting to play football, like why at this age when you're only 20, you play every day, you have great coaches, you have a great team, you have a great learning environment. Like, why does it have to end? And so I started to think, okay, how can I make this continue? And at that time, there wasn't a league. So the US, the Women's Professional League had started and folded, and so started and folded again. And so I just thought, okay, how can I find an opportunity to play? I was lucky enough. I also, with my scholarship, I had the chance to study abroad. So after you're done with your 4 years of eligibility, you can, if you have the time and you have to make it work. So I studied abroad in Spain, and there I went and I said, okay, I'm going to study Spanish, continue learning, and I'm, going to move a little bit away from football. And right away I realized, no, how can you go to Spain and then not, continue with your passion? And so I found a team there that was totally semi-professional. It's 3 days a week, I was again trying to juggle academics and football, but it was an amazing experience. And it was the first time that I had played outside the States. And it was the first time that I had to find a team. I set everything up in terms of my player pass and all sorts of things. And I was like, okay, if this opportunity, I know I can find more. So after playing in Spain, in Sevilla, I played there and I loved it, and then I got in contact with a friend who was playing in Sweden. And I realized, okay, let's keep trying to find other teams to play for, other opportunities. Also, of course, you want to get better and better. So learning from different styles of play, different coaches, when you've only been in one system of football, And then you realize, wow, here they focus more on technical, less about, fitness. Then it was just amazing to get that experience. And then it also just prompted me to look for the next opportunity to play. So that's a little bit what led me in the direction of then playing professionally in Sweden. I played on 2 different teams, but I always wanted to go back to the States to try to make the professional league, which then started at that time. I had a good run at it. I had an opportunity with the Boston Breakers, and then I got cut right before they made the final decision, which again, all these moments of rejection in football, I think it helps build your character. It's hard to say that at the moment, but then afterwards I knew I wanted to continue to play, but at a semi-professional level, and then somehow continue with sport and football in my life, but moving it more into a social direction. So for me, football gave me so many opportunities. Yes, I didn't make all of them come true, but I also learned a lot through football. I think most of that was that I got to play in different countries, meet, your teammates, your coaches, or the culture around it. And then I also saw that there were a lot of inequalities in football, and that so the game itself, there's a lot to be done. And then also the game can be used as a tool for non-football outcomes. So all of that really prepared me, I think, for the work I ended up doing and continue to do today.
Let's just go deep a bit about it, but I'm curious because you mentioned several countries. So maybe do you have something from them, from Sweden, from Spain, that you learned that you still have right now? You mentioned a bit about the inequalities that you found out while you were playing, and eventually led you to contribute in Brazil and in Paraguay. So now if you can tell us about this part, those lessons learned from this professional part of playing, but who ended up taking you to other paths.
Yeah, I think Spain for me was less about seeing maybe inequalities. What was interesting is I didn't play for the city team, but I was more of like a suburb of Sevilla. And there, what I did notice right away is that even though Spain is a country of football, there was still, I would say at that time, less opportunities for women to play. So you had a lot of women of different ages on one team. And you could also see that the program, the club development for women and girls was obviously less, because you could just see there were tons more boys playing. Although there was a space for women and young girls, it shocked me at first, because you come from the US where there's a girls team, boys team at all ages and all levels. So that was kind of the first thing. What I really learned about Spain is the different culture around it. So I'd have to say, even before, after games, some of my teammates were having a beer or smoking a cigarette, and they were amazing footballers, and like when we would do kind of trainings, and like the coach was saying, okay, fitness, and I was American there, I could do all the fitness and I was always in front, but they would like nutmeg me, so like so I learned a lot about the football cultures. And then what I loved is staying afterwards and watching, not because they were men playing, but I watched the boys and the football culture, the playing around with the ball and all of the creativity. And so I got to see kind of what it was like at the football club. And then when I would say for Sweden, what I meant is it kind of was frustrating that I had to go to Sweden even to get an opportunity to play and get paid. But then I also learned more about the Swedish system and like the investments and how the different clubs operate. And so I was starting to kind of understand more about not just me as a player, but like me in this bigger framework, And so understanding, why does Sweden have like a longer history there? How do they get the support from the local city, but then also sponsors, on our jerseys, we had all these different sponsors all over, like local, on our butts, on everywhere, you just had like sponsor names, and you had a lot more interest from companies, even in small clubs, And so that was interesting to learn about that. And then I'll take you to what I meant when I was, so what you all know about is then I ended up going and living in Paraguay. And in Paraguay, I was a couple of roles. I was never just strictly the football coach, but I had this opportunity to train a group of girls who were selected. It's called the Fundación Paraguaya, and they were selected to compete in the Homeless World Cup. And so these girls lived a completely different life than I'd ever lived. They never had opportunities to play. I mean, they lived in a very rural area. We were living in the Baracaju, So it's like, and it's a natural reserve. I mean, it's a place where life is just very different. Yeah. And so they never had like structured football opportunities. They were all super athletic. And so we started to kind of host at the school football games, trainings, like start from the basics, you know? And so the girls got invited. And so we formed a team, we worked with them, we worked with the school, the community, all in preparation for this amazing opportunity to play and to represent not only their organization, their school, you know, their community, but also Paraguay in this tournament in Brazil. And the tournament is called the Homeless World Cup. It's different countries, different cities each year. And it's a host, it's a partnership. And it's an amazing group of people who have had lots of challenges to play. But when they get there, they want to play, they want to make friends, they want to exchange, they want to learn, you know, they want to win. But these girls, it was that opened my eyes to the fact that so many girls and young women do not have the opportunity to play. They don't even have sports bras. They don't have football shoes, you know, all these things that like you kind of do need at least to like enable you to take those first steps. So that was my first experience where I was like, wow, you know, yes, I can complain about some of the lack of opportunities and things in my life and my football career, but let's take a look at the bigger picture and how there's a lot of inequalities in terms of opportunities and access to sport.
It's exactly what you said. We need to look at the bigger picture, right? And understand what is really happening. And after it, we can look to ourselves. But actually, you said everything that you shared here is, I think, so important even nowadays for the actual players. Because I've been working closely with players very recently, and I have the perception that some of them, they think they are only playing and they don't think outside of the box and take advantage of what they are doing. They actually have these experiences. You said you can understand what is around you, your environment, the culture, everything, and you can have this and bridge it to your next professional pathway. And players need to take care of this because the career is so short. They need to take advantage of it. And one of the things that I've been aware of it is that they are not acknowledging it on the pitch while they are playing, probably because now women's football is in huge momentum, but same time we need to look back and understand what we can learn inside of the pitch to take it for outside of it. And actually, when you started professionally, you probably had an experience that took you to your professional pathway, your entire professional pathway until now. So one of your first professional experiences took place within Rotary International, a global network of great minds who see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change. So, how did this experience shape you as a professional, considering you've had a great amount of experience in social impact projects since then?
Yeah, that's a great question. And also, I'd just like to go back to your point about players. I think there's a lot that players, if they can understand it's important that female players get the chance to be female players, and that's their role, you know, that they're professional players. They don't need to be necessarily asked to be an advocate here or there or there. Some players just want to focus on the game and focus on doing the best in that amount of time that they have. So I totally respect that. I think you have other players who are just automatically thinking about, we think about things differently, you know, their role on the team, their role in society, you know, and so you see that. You see a lot of, we all know there's a lot of female players that are the first to be activists about racial injustices, homophobia, discrimination. I'd have to say I'm really impressed with a lot, and not just being from the US. I see a lot there, but I see a lot globally. And I also think we need to remember that for some women, it's still, even getting on the field and being a professional in a very male-dominated world is an act of protest. You know, for some countries, it still is. It shouldn't be, but it is. So I think I really agree with your point. And the last thing is that when I speak with players who are still playing and going into this direction of what comes out after, I always think think of your experiences now and think of the transferability. So what are these skills that you know you're practicing every day on the field as a leader or as more of the silent one, but like, you know, all of those, and how do you transfer that to your next step? And you already are doing it. So it's more about understanding and being able to speak about it and speak and voice and share. Okay, I would be really good in this position because I did this in football, you know, and use those examples and not be afraid to do that. And this is what I had to do with Rotary as well. So because I was always like pursuing football, I always knew that I needed to be making money as well. And so, which is kind of sad. I know it's changing, you know, that women can focus on the game and be their best. But like in my days, it was, you had to have lots of jobs, whether it was something related to football, being a coach, doing camps, you know, all of this type of stuff, which is great. Or if you knew you didn't necessarily want to work in that space, but you know, you wanted to pursue another. So that's where I got involved with Rotary, and I was involved with lots of other kind of projects always on the side. And Rotary was amazing because it was my first experience, and it's huge. The headquarters are based in the city where I grew up in Evanston, and there I got to learn more about development. So this was important for me. I studied political science and a bit about international development. So for me to actually work in an organization where that was what they were doing, and they had programs and they had members all over the world, it was a great experience, and it kind of opened my eyes to also even what sport could do in the development context. So although that wasn't my position there, it did give me an idea of what different development projects were happening, what, you know, different frameworks and agendas and approaches people use. So it was a great experience, and it led me to many others where I was able to combine sport and development. So from that point, it was a good kind of stepping stone.
And from those topics that you deal with in development, I think there is a big one that you can notice when you check your curricula, and it is related to gender. And gender has been discussed lately a lot. I mean, it is rather a polemic issue still, and I like what you mentioned. It's kind of like an act of protest. I think daily. Right now, we are three women talking about football, so maybe this is our own act of protestation for today. But you work as a project consultant for Women Win, which is a global fund dedicated to advancing girls and women's rights through sports. And you already mentioned you work with the Paraguayan women's football team. You also work for women's empowerment through football, and you are a mentee for Leadership Women in Football. From your perspective, and this is the part where I'm saying this is polemic, we tend to discuss a lot of what actually gender equality means, especially in sports, especially in football. So can you please tell us, why is it important for the industry to be a lot more inclusive and female and foster female participation at every level there is?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, that's even understanding gender. So I like to think of gender and is also about relationships. So it's also male, female, and we all know that there's a whole gender scheme of people who identify differently. So to keep it in kind of this context as well, and gender relations is not just female empowerment. It's not just about women or people who identify as women and girls. So it's also very much relationship. I think what is really important in sports is that it's also about the body, and it's about the experiences of being your gender in sport. But I think when we look at it, gender equality or gender inequalities in sport, from what I've been able to kind of gather, is first I thought about participation, you know, so participation of young girls, young boys in sport, and what does that look like, and not just young boys, but girls of different backgrounds, you know, so you have socioeconomic, you have ethnic, you have religious. What are these barriers that are there so that girls maybe can't participate in the rate that they should, and that you obviously make the comparison with boys, but you could even compare within the different communities of girls and see who is getting to participate, who's accessing the resources, who's participating on a long term, who's getting to benefit from sport, who's getting the different opportunities and so on. So you have the participation, but then you also have the coaches, you have the administrators, you have the different people working in sport. And I think we should also look there. Then you have organizations, you have institutions of sport, you have companies about sport. So you have, I mean, sport is so large. So like trying to kind of look at participation, but then access to different resources, opportunities, And then you even have kind of what I would say, then you have policy level, and you have like, I mean, an organization can have a policy around gender equality in what they do, like an internal, but then also externally, like how they want to operate and how they want to run their programs. And then you also have sport institutions and federations, and they have gender equality policies. And normally they try to mainstream those so that it can deal with how different people are hired, the decision makers, the resources that go to girls sports, boys sports, sports for youth that identify and, with different gender orientations. You have, it's just like, for me, it can't just be looked at, okay, at the bottom. So how many participation, like there's lots of decisions that were made in order to even get to the point of like what you can see more visibly. You can measure those types of things, participation, but you have to kind of look and see where it all began. And I often think that, like, generally sport institutions, from my knowledge, and federations, I mean, they were really designed for males to play sport, and males to make decisions about sport, and even men to make decisions about women's sports and girls' sports. So I think when you look at gender inequalities in sport, you can also learn a lot from what's happening outside of sport. I don't think we should only look at our sector and think that we're like so different than everyone. I mean, we can look at business, we can look at the education field, you can look at elsewhere and also try to kind of see how they perceive whether it's a problem and then the different solutions. So there's a really good, for anyone listening, there's a project in the EU, it's called All In, and they have this amazing way where they analyze what gender inequalities looks like in sport. And it's, I think, 14 countries in the EU. And they give you kind of ways that you can understand it and then measure it. So like I said, participation, coaching, whether they have policies. And it's a really good kind of framework because sometimes you can get lost when you start to think about it. But I'd be happy to share that link with you all after.
Thank you, and we will be happy to.
I was already Googling it.
Yeah, it's good. The database, yeah.
Perfect. No, but actually, what you said, I was thinking about around here, not a statement, but at least we are always talking, for example, in football, in women's football, about the talent pipeline, development talent pipeline. And what we need is a gender equality talent pipeline that we need to strive for it because, as said, you mentioned perfectly, it's not only about the positions, the adult positions, the senior positions. It starts actually, it's from the bottom to the top. And we need to understand that, to not forgetting one part and only focus on other. Of course, we are humans, we cannot do everything, but we can kind of strive for it. But actually, the next question, we want to focus only on
one thing.
We have to divide. We cannot do everything together. But yes, so and we strive for it every day. We are always talking about it because we need gender equality on the top positions. In this case, on the governance position, we need more women in governance. We are always saying that. So related to this part and to gender causes, you are currently a governance in football researcher for Fair Network, where you're collecting data about women in governance positions throughout the football industry. So are there any conclusive results yet on this investigation? And if not, what are your main outputs from your job so far?
Yeah, so that's an interesting project. So Fair Network, if anyone, it's an amazing network. I think from my perspective, it's based in Europe, but they do work all around, and it's against all kinds of discrimination in football. And this research position was primarily, I was selected to do the research for Germany. So looking at the Bundesliga and looking across all the clubs. Well, first we started at the Football Federation, and then we looked across clubs. And it's not just women in these different positions, but also women of ethnic minority backgrounds. So they wanted to go and look at women, and then what are the backgrounds of these women in these positions. And then we looked at men, and then we gathered all the data as best as we could. Of course, you have to be very clear about, how do you define ethnic minority? and so on. So all of that was clear, and that it was the same definition and concept used across the different countries which were analyzed. And then, I was specifically looking at Bundesliga, the federation, and then the clubs, and then looking at the governance, so the board level, then also the decision makers, so the higher kind of positions within the clubs, and then also looking at training staff, so the head coaches and managers. I can't say, I mean, I did the kind of preliminary research with amongst others, and then what they are doing, a researcher based out of the Netherlands, they're taking the research, and obviously they have to verify it and so on. And this is what they're doing. They're doing a report about it. There have been some findings. It's clear, I think, that there are not enough women in decision-making positions across football. I don't think anyone needs us to say that. I mean, you just look on the club websites and the federations. And then what they were concerned about is understanding not what type, but the backgrounds of these women, especially as there's more of a push to get more women and girls of all different backgrounds, ethnicity, religion, involved and engaged in the game. And then when you don't have anyone that represents these different populations and communities at those decision-making levels and who are visible, then that's a problem. So I know that I don't think they were surprised by the results. I'll look. I know that there was an article shared. The other thing that's really interesting about the data is that now it's called the Erasmus Plus. So the European Union has different projects around sports, all sorts of different projects that encourage partnerships, and they're actually taking the same topic and they're doing a hands-on, like a practitioner-based project around the same topic of women, ethnic minority women in football. And so I can share that the link. It's just starting. I think they just had the kickoff, but they're really going to look at like dissecting the data, looking at reports, but then also try to think of solutions. So we know there's a problem, but what is it? Is it the pipeline, like you mentioned? Is it, if you don't have enough women getting involved at the, as players in the beginning, then how do you maybe expect them to get to the different positions? How is somebody getting to that top, decision-making position, and what does that role include? So I'll definitely share it. I think it's just indication that this is an important topic, right? I mean, I think it's a 2 to 3 year project. So we'll have to see kind of what kind of solutions they develop from it.
One of the most interesting facts about your career is that you do have a holistic perspective of football and obstacles that we need to tackle in football. And I will try and connect several ideas of the things that we already mentioned. First, that it depends of what you're looking at. Maybe you will overlook some other stuff. So in your case, for example, maybe if you were only a consultant for gender, you will overlook the small differences amongst all the levels of women, for example. In this case, let's say it's not the same to be a South American woman, a Latino in the US, and also just an American playing football in Europe, let's say. And also something we already mentioned before is the importance of using platforms. And in this case, in this particular question, I like the idea of this European project that you're doing, European Union Research Project, that you're doing with Borussia Dortmund. Sometimes we fans, and now I'll talk for myself as a football fan, we like following our celebrities, following our singers. And in this case, it is important for professional teams to acknowledge obstacles and try to tackle them with their platforms, because probably this will help a lot more than just a bunch of volunteers trying to work for a cause. So if you could please develop a bit about this project, which consists of what we research. It consists about combating anti-Semitism in football through educational initiatives and law enforcement measures. What do you seek to tackle with this struggle?
Yeah, this is, I love the way that you moved into kind of the space of football clubs, and what I'm really interested in what they are doing and what they can do more of in terms of how they contribute to society. I mean, they already are contributing, they're the platforms and the visibility where football is happening at the highest levels, the players, the games, the entertainment. But I would say and again, I'm not saying I'm expert on this, but you see a lot of football clubs doing more in their local community and then also in their global. Yeah, they also have reasons for them to do that, to create a fan base in different parts of the world. But a lot of clubs, if you look at kind of, especially I'm learning in Germany, they were rooted in the community. They weren't designed to be these professional clubs making lots of money. You know, they were owned by a certain percentage by the fans, you know, so it was kind of a local institution. So going back to your question about, so it's called Changing the Chance. It's another European Commission funded program. The partners involved, as you said, are Borussia Dortmund, Feyenoord. So it's a football club, a professional football club in the Netherlands. The Anne Frank House. They're obviously experts on anti-Semitism and addressing it through education and non-formal education. And so we are all part of this program, and I had the role as a contributor. And so it was a group of us who came from different backgrounds. I was selected more so for my practitioner experience, so designing toolkits, working in kind of that non-formal education space in football, whereas others are academics. They know everything about the right-wing extremism, also about anti-Semitism, how it manifests in football. And so we worked together, and the whole point of the project, and actually it's a good time that you asked that, because we just released the compendium of good practices. And this showcases the different practices that football clubs are doing to address anti-Semitism within their fan base, and then also within their local community. So this can be manifestations as chants in the stadium, where, you know, there's different clubs that are chanting and saying very anti-Semitic, using anti-Semitic language. It's also clubs that are dealing with fans that are using anti-Semitic behaviors. And this is even going to games, you know? And so this whole project was first research and very much based on, okay, what exists? First of all, what's the problem? How does it manifest itself? And there's a whole lot of academics out there, and this is a super interesting topic. So gathering that and then trying to understand it in the football context. And then the compendium is a compilation of 20 or 21 practices across not just your Borussia Dortmund, who's doing a lot to approach these issues, but also kind of more local clubs where they do a lot around intercultural dialogue and intercultural understanding with youth. You know, so we tried to kind of showcase a variety of practices. And then from that, there's also guidelines that were published. And the guidelines will come next. The compendium was just published. The guidelines are, okay, so here are these practices. And now if you're interested in doing something and you need to do something, you know, these are the guidelines that we would suggest. Of course, they're guidelines, you know, they're not. And so those were kind of targeting different football clubs, but also at all different levels. So that was for me a real learning experience, because for me, a lot, like you said, a lot of what I've done in football is more around gender equality, around intercultural dialogue and so on. So for me, this was definitely a learning experience, and also realizing obviously it's not just a European problem, but I can also share the links to those different reports and compendiums if you're interested.
Please do it, because I was thinking about this exactly. And I'm sorry to say this coming from a club in Germany, for example, for me, it's not, of course, there's a historic background, but it's not what I want to say, is that it's not a surprise for me. Because I think the whole environment in Germany around football, it's about that. I mean, I will only mention St. Pauli as a great example of everything that we aim for, at least about equality everywhere. But these projects are so important, and I will only mention some a simple thing that you said about the chants in the stadium, about going to the stadium. But going to the stadium, we all have the perception of it that it's a struggle for some people. It's normal, but the chants are something that we hear since we were young. So we are chanting something for our team that we don't know what we're saying. And when we are adults, for us, it's normal to say it, but actually the message, the meaning, it's completely different, and we need to take care out of it. It was not done before, so we need to take care of it now, because we need to teach and to educate the next generations, which is we are always saying that we need to do it. And sometimes it starts for these small things, with these small things. And that's why sport is a vehicle, is a platform. In this case, football is a platform for the change. But let's back now to you. And actually, it's not, yeah, it's about your work, but actually, we started this interview. We described you as a consultant for international development, cooperation, and partnerships around sport for development. But actually, we're not being fair regarding your extensive curricula. I mean, your day is probably more than 25 hours. You have to say this to us.
The bags.
With contributions in Paraguay, Brazil, Kenya, Indonesia, India, Liberia, and Germany, and at least 12 organizations where you are active just now, how do you manage to comply with all of your duties? What would you advise for professionals to succeed at working on several projects at a time?
Oh, this is this is a good question. After coming from the guideline question, wow, yeah. So actually, I go back because I not that people have asked me. This isn't a common question, but I have had even when I speak with my family, they're like, "You juggle a lot." But I would have to go back to my university days, where this whole system in the U.S. is really structured as an app. If you want to do well in university and you want to do well as an athlete, you're doing both at the same time. Of course, there's support staff and there's a whole structure in place to support you. But I think I learned a lot from those 4 years at university because my life didn't just end as a student and an athlete. I mean, I'm not patting my shoulder, but I like to be involved in the community. So I did different things in the community as well. So I kind of learned then that how much I could handle. And I realized that I could juggle a lot. It's not for everybody. I know some athletes, when they are an athlete, they want to focus on the game and that's it. But I realized when I was playing football, I loved the game, but I wasn't like a football head, like I liked to also think about other things. And so this was sometimes actually, I think, limited to me, maybe as reaching my higher, a bigger potential in football is because I was often thinking about, other things, other projects, what's going on in the world. Not that strong footballers aren't, but I just reflected on that later in life. And so I think I've always been like this. I like to juggle a lot. And I'm not just talking about football, but like really just, and I think there's so much to learn. I think once you see kind of what football can also do in terms of its social impact, you get really excited about it. It's an amazing tool because I've experienced it myself. So that gets me more excited and I want to learn more about different projects. For example, there's a lot right now about sports and their impact on the environment. And then also like the environment and climate change, but then also how sport could potentially kind of be positioned as like a tool or a platform to make changes, human behaviors and decisions around the environment. So I'm really kind of inspired by that as well. So I guess advice would be, find things that make you, that you're passionate about. Try to also see sport in kind of a bigger context is like really a part of society. And then see what it is that you're interested in. And then, don't be afraid to ask to get involved in projects or even, of course, you have to, I was a little bit privileged, I could volunteer. Not everyone can volunteer because they have to pay debt, they have to pay loans and everything. So, but if you can, of course, volunteering, but then also look to try to kind of see different partnerships happening and try to find ways that you can also get involved and contribute. Also, the other thing I'd say is find other people. It doesn't have to be women. For me, it has been connecting with other women in the world of football and learning about their experiences, and then also not just asking for things, but offering. What can you offer to others and find out that as you network. Like when you network, just don't go ask people, okay, can you help me? Can you connect me with this person or that? But think about what it is that you have as a strength that you can offer to others. And then you kind of work with someone like that. And so you really build relationships. That's something that I think. And I loved your idea. And you said in the beginning, both of you, that it's about connecting women working in football so that we also can speak with one another, we can come up with solutions, we can talk about challenges, we can celebrate achievements, We can be more visible, we can connect and network. And I think it's happening. I think this kind of women in football, whether it's men's football, women's football, youth football, I think it's happening. And during the pandemic, I also saw it. And I love just kind of the way people are speaking more with one another about what they're doing and what they hope football can do. I don't know if that was helpful.
No, I mean, I will tell you, it is helpful. It has been helpful. I mean, I will start by myself. First of all, because I am relieved. So I've been also a professional juggler myself in a way, but in countries like mine, there's still like a huge traditional path you need to follow. So if you are an economist, you need to study this and then go and work for a bank or work for, I don't know, to macroeconomics or deal with really huge mathematical problems and models. And that's it. That's pretty much it. And then you just have like your whole life plan. But at the same time, there are a lot of shifts in if you check for labor markets. I mean, project-based, this is like a normal thing in other countries. I mean, you are able to work for many projects, for many companies, for many initiatives. But what you're saying is really important because it's not only about getting involved in a lot of stuff just because you need the money or just because you feel that you're interested. It's also because you know your value. You do have an expertise, a proposal, and you need to contribute with that. But let me say, it's just, I mean, if we don't have no audience out there right now for this chapter, I mean, at least you impacted me in that positive way because I am like that. I do like involving in several initiatives, but it's hard to cope with everything. So I think your advices were just perfect on that area. But moving into our questions and back to the traditional way of doing podcast, there is something that we haven't discussed because we also like juggling a lot in Toogle's podcast. And let's move to climate change. That's something we haven't discussed because, I mean, we haven't had guests focus on this area, but could you please tell us a bit about the link of sports, the contribution of sports to climate change, and especially as you are the program manager at Football for Climate, what should this topic be addressed in the industry?
Yeah, so and let me preface this, like, I didn't study environment. Well, I had a couple courses in environmental studies, but it's more, it's like I'm always constantly trying to read and take courses myself about climate change, climate action, climate policy, because it's something we are all dealing with and we have to deal with. So what I've learned about in my own kind of learning environment, and I've referred to some of the people who have supported us with Football for Climate, including David Goldblatt. He's a professor out of out of the UK, and so we know that, like, if you just look at any of their research, so the way that sport has contributed to climate change, I mean, as an industry, they're measuring all this. So often they look at the highest football clubs or the big events, the mega events. I mean, you can see this also what the IOC, they're putting out sustainability strategies around the environment. FIFA, they're putting, so all of these mega events, they obviously have a local impact on the community, on the people, but also on the environment. And I don't think that's anything new, but it's more now people are really paying attention to it. And so I think there you see, and those are mega events, but then you also have your normal other events that happen at kind of the national level, your different leagues and everything that goes around having an event, people moving and transportation. You have the waste at the stadium, you have the stadium itself. So like you could see in Germany, there's a lot of stadium that have the photovoltaic. So it's like this, or kind of like solar panels, so ways that the stadium, and in the US, we see a lot of this all over, just the way as an infrastructure, as a piece of infrastructure, how much energy they're using, different types of energy, the way that they deal with their waste, the way they deal with their plastic, everything that happens inside of a stadium. So the food that's offered, the products that are sold in the gift shop, then the ways that the players, they go from one game to the next, the way that the seasons are. I mean, you could even look at the calendar and how much flights and all that. And then also the way to get to the stadium. So if it's close to public transportation, or if they have bike slots, all of this stuff is like, from what I'm understanding, and again, I'm not an expert, but these are like the discussions. But then it's also going down to more local events. So I think anytime you have an event, you have an environmental impact, right? I mean, so I've even seen there's a group in Germany, Sports for Future, and they give you different guidelines as to like. So I'm a coach. I coach my kids' football teams, and we have tournaments. So things that we can even consider, guidelines, checklists that we can consider if we want to reduce even our environmental impact. So things like the food that we purchase. You could also do more vegetarian. You could do local. The water bottles. Generally here in Germany, I'd say they don't use a lot of plastic for the kids don't do one sip and then throw it away. But like this type of stuff you can pay attention to. And there's a lot more out there in terms of like guidelines for this as well. So I think on that side, that's more the impact on the environment. And probably there's probably all about sports wear, sports, how footballs are made, jerseys, all of this, So this is part of the conversation. But then on the other side, what David Goldblatt, which I'm inspired by, he also sees sport as part of the solution, because he sees it as it's the one thing, when you get kind of these big thinkers to talk about sports, they always talk about the hope and the way that it moves people, and like that it can transform. It's so emotional. And so he also talks about this aspect of sport as like a platform for getting more knowledge about the environment, a platform to kind of inspire people to make changes in the way that they interact with the environment. So I think, again, there's some great kind of resources out there. There's lots of reports. I think this is, if you look at the sustainability strategies of any of the big sport institutions, you can see that everybody's trying to figure it out. I don't have answers, but I know that it's something that we all need to be involved in.
Yeah, and we agree. We agree. And actually, as you said, football has been a platform for a change for almost everything. So it will be also for climate. And regarding the project, I mean, I think Matthew Barrett is also involved with at least he told us here a bit about it. And he said something that it's in my mind. He said right now, probably in football, one of the hot topics is gender equality. But next big one will be climate change, and we believe in that. So we need to prepare for that for the future. And football is also a platform for responsibility. And if there's something that we know which is intrinsic not only in football and in sports, is the social and cultural responsibility, everything together. And throughout this conversation, we could state that through your different working experience, so we could actually see in everything that you do. So for you, what does responsibility mean in football exactly these days? Why committing your life to an apparently less fun area of this sport for some, and discuss issues as anti-Semitism, gender inequality, development and youth leadership, between other polemic topics?
Very good. I think, to be honest, when I got into sport for development sector, it's also oftentimes it's something that did well for you. So I'm not going to lie. I mean, sport for me brought me so many opportunities. So of course, from my own experiences, I could easily see how sport, because I grew up with sport opportunities, I knew that it could lead to these non-sport outcomes, If I had a horrible experience in sport, I probably wouldn't have gone into sport for development. But I also don't think that you need to have been a professional, because I actually think it's not just the sport, it's the people around the sport. It's the conditions it's played in. It's about good coaches. It's about good resources. It's about a good program plan, And so I think for me, the responsibility comes from the fact that I really do think I've had a lot of, and I continue to have amazing experiences in sport, not just football. And I realize that it's not the case for many, many people, and I'm not going to solve that. But I want to be part of working with others, maybe sharing practices, trying to work towards that more people have opportunities and access to sport. And I don't think it has to be sport for development by any means. We were already speaking before this call about the sport industry, And I think for me, a responsibility comes when you've had a good experience, you've had access, you've had a privilege to something. And then you kind of have these moments where you realize that's not the case for many, especially young women. And also, we know that youth of different gender orientations, I mean, the LGBTQ community, very little good experiences in sport also, if it's not designed in a good, inclusive way. So I think that's what drives me. To be honest, I'm not someone, I like working more at the practitioner level or like on programs. I don't necessarily understand, although I spoke to it today about policies and governance. It's not my area where I could say I have good, experience. I could research it from the outside, but I don't actually know what it looks like in a boardroom. So I think that wouldn't be my responsibility to make changes there, but at least I can try to understand kind of the bigger picture, because I think all these different levels of sport, they interact with one another. And I don't want to just kind of work in a silo also, which is easy to do sometimes because you have to get work done. But that's why also I think it's important to have conversations with you all, with other women, men working in the field, to kind of also learn from each other. What are the different challenges in the different spaces we're working in, and see if we can, come up with solutions and also make sport a better experience for more people. So I think that's kind of how I feel my responsibility. And I am a youth coach, so I feel like there I really can, and I try to apply some of the stuff I learned from my own experiences, but it's a little bit, it's fun with my kids to be their coach. Sometimes I'm like talking about all the confidence and all these other things, and they're like, I just want to play, so I have to remind myself of that too.
Marisa, I think you have ticked every box available in your professional and personal career, but we are sure that you have plenty more to do in the future. So if you can please tell us a bit about your long-term goals, what are there in your plans for the future? I mean, we know you are completing a Master of Political Science and Public Administration, Conflict Management and International Administration at Constance University. So you are never resting, so to speak. And I think we can close our interview with that. Please tell us a bit about your future.
Wow, yeah. This whole pandemic, I always feel like it's hard to talk about your future, but we have to, we have to think about how to do things also differently. I think for me, my future, of course, very short term is, as you said, I'm finishing a political science master's. And actually what's exciting there is I'm doing my thesis around, I've convinced the political science department, I'm doing it around CSR in football. So I'm really excited there because we've got access to a database and it's measuring CSR in terms of governance, community, and environment. And looking at kind of ideas for how we can test it with quantitative analysis, looking at what we could propose that are drivers of clubs' behaviors around CSR. So why is it that specific clubs do more than others, for example, and in what areas? So that's definitely more of a short-term goal. Actually, I would say a long-term goal, I'm not going to talk about different projects because those are kind of, as we all know, like moving along and doing well. Or not doing well. But what I really have this dream of creating, I'm very inspired by the Women's Football UK network. So they have this, I'm sure you both know about it, whereby they've developed into kind of this entity that offers all sorts of support for women working in all areas of football. And some of my friends and I in Germany, and I'd love to talk with other people, whoever is listening, or also you two, about creating something like that, in Germany, but then also looking to connect within countries. And I know there's so much I don't want to replicate or duplicate in the sense of not working with others, but I would really like to try to establish something like that in Germany, and then also work with other countries where they also are establishing these women in football communities. And that's really like a passion project, but that actually drives me, and that's why I want to meet more women working in football as well, because I think it could be such a great opportunity, especially as we have the Women's World Cup coming up, and there's different kind of these kind of high level achievements. But I think if we can kind of understand what it looks like for women working at all levels of football, it'd be really cool, and to work together. I would leave it at that just because that's something I think about a lot. But and maybe we can all work together on that as well with Leadership Women's Football. Obviously that's what they're doing. There's a lot of great groups. I just would love to kind of connect the dots more amongst these groups.
this is where we like this interview being recorded, because now we have it on tape and we can definitely work towards that
Yes.
goal. But yeah, thank you, Marisa. I mean, I think first, thank you for leaving a lot of homework for us, because we do need to go through these links and take a lot of results and insights and share them with our audiences, and mainly for encouraging us to think about football as a way to tackle many of the obstacles we have in our societies. Thank you very much for coming to the Two Goals podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity.
And for our Two Goals podcast audiences, please take advantage of these conversations. Those who are seeking for a job position, those studying any sports related degree, or those who aren't, but who are looking to try and grow personally and professionally, like Katia and I. That's what we're trying to do here. We do have fun, but we're actually trying to achieve that. And remember that we are available with our account Two Goals Podcast. We're on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Spotify. So please go there, listen to us, and stay safe, stay tuned, and have a lovely week.